After a grueling 12-hour day, Vanessa finally made it home, completely drained. The moment she stepped inside, she saw her mother-in-law sitting quietly at the dining table, her eyes fixed on the front door as though she had been waiting for her all evening. "There you are, sweetheart," Brenda said with a gentle smile. "Come, sit down. Dinner's ready." She stood up, took Vanessa by the hand, and guided her to the table. Then she placed the only chicken drumstick on Vanessa's plate. The rest of the meal was nothing more than a bowl of hot vegetable soup and a plate of greens. "I'm too old to eat much meat anyway," Brenda said with a smile. "You eat it!" Vanessa didn't even realize tears were rolling down her face. She turned and wrapped her arms around Brenda, catching her completely by surprise. Then she broke down, crying like a little girl. Only 2 women were left living in that house now. Somewhere along the way, without even realizing it, Vanessa had come to love her mother-in-law as if she were her own mother. "Mom, Dad, tomorrow I want to take Vanessa with me to Kansas City. We're going to buy a place there." James took a seat and shared his plan as soon as the family finished dinner. Robert and Brenda exchanged uneasy glances. Neither of them spoke for a few seconds before Brenda broke the silence. "So you want to bring your wife to the city? You think she'll have a hard time staying here with us?" "No, Mom. I've given it a lot of thought. I work in Kansas City, so I want my wife there with me. I don't plan on moving back to Liberty, so we're going to buy a small townhouse." "What do you think?" Brenda asked, turning to her husband. "I think it's the right decision. A husband and wife should live together. It'll be better that way. But where are you planning to buy it?" "How much does it cost?" Robert asked. "It's close to my job. The townhouse is about $260,000. Do you have enough money? Do you want me to ask your brothers if they can lend you some?" Brenda asked. "No, Mom. Vanessa and I have saved enough for the down payment, and I borrowed a little from a few friends. We'll pay the mortgage off little by little." "What about Vanessa? What will she do there?" "I've already found her an opportunity. A convenience store nearby is hiring, and they'll let her work there." "That's good. If you're taking your wife to Kansas City, your father and I won't stop you. Just remember, life in the city is more complicated than it is here. If you have debt, pay it off one step at a time. Work hard, and don't spend every few days arguing with each other." "We won't. Don't worry, Mom." After saying that, James went into the kitchen to help Vanessa clean up. Robert and Brenda remained at the table, their faces filled with concern. It wasn't that they didn't want James to bring his wife to the city. They worried because the young couple had little life experience. Buying a home meant taking on a large mortgage. If money became tight, arguments could easily follow. Someday they would have children, and without family nearby, raising them would be much harder. Vanessa had grown up in a small town and had never gone beyond high school. Would she be able to find work that suited her in Kansas City? If she couldn't, she'd be alone at home while her husband spent the day at work. James and Vanessa had only been married for a few months. Brenda had hoped her daughter-in-law would stay in Liberty a little longer. Once they had children, she and Robert could help take care of them. The family home and the property would belong to James and Vanessa one day anyway. But now their youngest son wanted to take his wife to Kansas City, and Brenda couldn't bring herself to stand in his way. Robert and Brenda had 3 sons. James was the youngest and earned the least. He worked a regular job, unlike his 2 older brothers, Michael and Anthony, who owned successful businesses in Kansas City. Even though James wasn't as well off, he never liked depending on anyone. Brenda had offered to ask his brothers for a loan, but he refused. That was simply who James was. He hated being a burden to other people, and Brenda worried that if hard times came, he would try to carry everything on his own. After telling his parents about his plan, James brought it up again with Vanessa that night. "Tomorrow I'm taking you to Kansas City." Vanessa smiled as soon as she heard him, but there was still a hint of hesitation. "I want to go with you, but if I leave, who will stay here with your parents? They're both healthy. They can take care of themselves. But no buts. I'll find you a job." "You don't have to worry about that. Wherever I am, that's where my wife belongs." "I'm not worried about work. I'm worried about the money. We still have such a big mortgage. I don't know how long it'll take us to pay it off," James laughed. "You're worrying too much. We borrowed the money, so we'll pay it back little by little. Now get some sleep. We have to leave early tomorrow." "Okay." Vanessa didn't say anything else. She lay quietly beside him, unable to fall asleep. The thought of leaving Liberty for the first time in her life filled her with excitement, but it also made her nervous. After lying awake for a while, she turned to say something to James, only to find that he was already snoring. She reached over and covered his mouth with her hand for a second before pulling it away with a laugh. Then she wrapped her arms around him and rested against his chest. She rested against him until she finally fell asleep. She smiled to herself. Tomorrow she would follow him to Kansas City. They would build a life together and stay together forever. Holding that thought close, she buried her face against him, breathed in the familiar scent that always made her feel safe, and finally closed her eyes. As Vanessa drifted off to sleep, memories of her relationship with James came flooding back. They had grown up in the same neighborhood and started school together. By the time they were in middle school, they already knew they liked each other. After finishing high school, Vanessa couldn't afford to continue her education, so she went to work to help her family. James went on to college. During his senior year, he told her how he felt, and she said yes. They promised each other that once he graduated and found a stable job, they would get married. While James was in college, he drove back to Liberty every other weekend just to see her. Vanessa's parents knew about their relationship, but they couldn't help worrying. Their daughter had little education, while James came from a respected family and was earning a college degree. They were afraid he would meet someone else and leave Vanessa behind. One day, her mother, Patricia, tried to persuade her. "Vanessa, you're putting all your faith in James. What if he changes his mind one day?" Vanessa shook her head. "He won't. We promised we'd stay together for the rest of our lives," Patricia sighed. "Promises are easy to make. No one knows what tomorrow will bring. Men can change. You don't have to worry. James isn't that kind of man. I'll only ever marry him." Patricia couldn't change her daughter's mind. She had no choice but to respect her decision. Even though James still cared deeply for Vanessa, Patricia couldn't stop worrying. A daughter who waited too long could miss her chance to build a family. But Vanessa trusted James completely and refused to listen to anyone who told her otherwise. In the end, Patricia let out a quiet sigh and stopped trying to convince her. Time proved Vanessa right. James kept every promise he had made. As soon as he graduated, he found a job in Kansas City. Then he asked Robert and Brenda to visit Vanessa's parents and formally ask for permission for the two of them to marry. Robert and Brenda had known Vanessa since she was a little girl. They had always seen her as a kind and hardworking young woman, so they gladly accepted their youngest son's decision. Their two older sons had already settled down in Kansas City, and they were happy that James had chosen someone from Liberty. They hoped he and his wife would stay close to home and keep the family together. About a month later, James started his new job in Kansas City, and he and Vanessa got married. Vanessa moved in with Robert and Brenda while James worked in the city during the week and drove home every weekend. Nearly 6 months had passed since their wedding. The day before, James told her he was finally bringing her to Kansas City. She couldn't wait to be with him every day, but the thought of leaving her hometown for the first time made her uneasy. She had no idea what life in the city would be like or whether she could adapt to it. Even so, she believed a wife belonged beside her husband. James had told her, "Wherever I am, that's where you belong." She wanted the same thing. No matter how unfamiliar Kansas City might be, she was determined to build a life there with the man she loved. Early the next morning, James and Vanessa packed their belongings and left for Kansas City. A month after Vanessa joined him there, they moved into the townhouse they had bought. James had already arranged a job for her at a convenience store not far from their home. Because money was still tight, they agreed to focus on paying off their mortgage before thinking about having children. For the next 3 years, they decided they wouldn't start a family. Vanessa's paycheck covered their daily living expenses, while James used his salary to make the mortgage payments. Vanessa had grown up in a small town, but she learned quickly and adapted well. Before long, she settled into life in Kansas City. Even though life wasn't easy, she and James were happy together. On weekends, they often drove back to Liberty to visit both sides of the family. Their parents were happy to see them and always encouraged them to keep working hard. "Take it one step at a time. You'll pay off the mortgage eventually." Those words gave James and Vanessa even more confidence. They believed their lives would only get better with time. A year passed before they knew it. The young woman who had once been afraid to cross a busy street had changed completely. During her first few days in Kansas City, everything had felt unfamiliar. Now she knew every road and every neighborhood near their home. She was still working at the convenience store, and her income was enough to cover the couple's everyday expenses. Their life wasn't perfect, but they were building it together, one day at a time. One morning, while Vanessa was helping a customer at the convenience store, her phone rang. It was James. "Vanessa, Dad's gone. Get your things ready. I'll pick you up, and we're heading back to Liberty right away." Vanessa's legs went weak. The color drained from her face. She was in the middle of ringing up a customer, but her hands shook so badly she could barely finish. James had spoken so quickly that she didn't fully understand. "What do you mean? Which dad? Oh my God. What happened? How did he die?" James was just as shaken. He only managed to say a few more words before ending the call. Vanessa hurried to the back of the store, told her manager what had happened, and asked for emergency leave to attend her father-in-law's funeral. During the drive back to Liberty, she cried the entire way. She kept calling out for Robert and couldn't understand how someone who had been perfectly healthy could be gone so suddenly. James was heartbroken too, but he tried to stay strong. He pulled Vanessa close and held her for the rest of the drive. They arrived in Liberty a little before 11 that morning. The house was already filled with relatives, neighbors, and family friends. James's two older brothers had arrived before them. As soon as James and Vanessa stepped inside, they broke down in tears with the rest of the family. Robert had been in good health, but a sudden stroke had taken his life. He hadn't even had the chance to leave a final message for his wife or his children. Brenda was devastated. She cried until she nearly collapsed again and again. Losing her husband so unexpectedly was more than she could bear. Michael, the oldest brother, took charge of the funeral arrangements on behalf of the family. Relatives, friends, and neighbors came to pay their respects. Everyone spoke about what a hardworking man Robert had been. He had spent his life raising his children. Now that they were all grown and successful, he had only just begun to enjoy a more comfortable life before it was taken away from him. After the funeral, James returned to Kansas City for work, while Vanessa stayed behind in Liberty to keep Brenda company for a while. James's older brothers and their wives were busy running their businesses, so they asked Vanessa to stay in Liberty and look after Brenda for a while. Vanessa agreed without hesitation. She didn't want her mother-in-law to be alone. Robert's death had been such a terrible shock that Brenda still hadn't recovered from it. Besides, someone needed to take care of the memorial corner and keep fresh flowers there every day. Brenda was getting older, and Vanessa didn't want her handling everything by herself. With Vanessa staying by her side, encouraging her, and looking after her every day, Brenda slowly began to regain both her strength and her spirits. Time passed quickly. 7 weeks had gone by since Robert's funeral. On the evening, the family gathered to remember him. All 3 sons and their wives came home. After dinner, Brenda looked around the table and said, "It's been 7 weeks since your father passed away. Tomorrow, James and Vanessa are going back to Kansas City, and I'm going with them." Vanessa felt uneasy the moment she heard those words. Even so, she didn't say anything. She only glanced at James. He met his mother's eyes instead of his wife's and answered, "Of course, Mom. Come stay with us. We'll feel better knowing you're not living here by yourself." "I think that's the best idea too," Michael added. "James and Vanessa will have more time to be with you. Anthony and I are tied up with work all the time. We'd only worry about you staying here alone." Brenda nodded. "That's what I was thinking too. I've gotten used to living with James." Everyone agreed with her decision. Vanessa didn't dislike her mother-in-law. Ever since she married into the family, Brenda had always treated her kindly. They had never argued. Still, hearing that Brenda wanted to move in with them left Vanessa uncomfortable. It felt as though a new responsibility had landed on her shoulders. James was the youngest son, and they had the hardest financial situation in the family. That night, Vanessa couldn't fall asleep. She kept thinking about it. James had 2 older brothers. Why didn't Brenda move in with one of them instead? James earned the least in the family. He worked a regular job, and Vanessa's income from the convenience store was only enough to cover their everyday expenses. With Brenda moving in, Vanessa couldn't help thinking there would be another burden for them to carry. Michael and Anthony were doing very well. Each of them owned a successful business and earned far more money than James did. They lived in large houses, drove nice cars, and had far more comfortable lives. If that was the case, why did Brenda insist on living with the youngest son instead? Those thoughts stayed with Vanessa, but she kept them to herself. The more she thought about them, the more frustrated she became. After Brenda moved to Kansas City, she took care of most of the housework while James and Vanessa went to work every day. Even so, Vanessa still couldn't let go of the frustration she had been carrying. One day, she finally brought it up with James. "I really don't understand why your mom insisted on moving in with us. We're the youngest, and we're struggling the most financially. Why does all the responsibility end up with us?" James looked at her. "Why are you making this so complicated? Mom moved in with us because she likes being with us." "Likes being with us? It feels more like she's making things harder for us." "Don't say that. If Mom hears you, it'll hurt her. She's used to living with us. We have the routine she's comfortable with." Before we got married, she stayed with Michael and Anthony too, but she never felt at home there. She always came back after a few days. Besides, Mom has her own pension. She gives you part of it every month to help with household expenses. "So you're saying I'm only thinking about money?" Vanessa asked. "That's not what I meant. Mom doesn't eat much. I'm not talking about the grocery bill. I'm talking about responsibility. We're the youngest. It shouldn't all fall on us. People always say the oldest child should carry that responsibility." James let out a sigh. "Every child has the same responsibility. You're making a big issue out of something that doesn't need to be one." He didn't say another word. He walked out of the room, leaving Vanessa sitting there by herself. She stamped her foot once, dropped onto the bed, and muttered under her breath. Michael and Anthony were wealthy. They lived in large homes, drove expensive cars, and had comfortable lives. Why hadn't Brenda chosen to live with one of them? Why did she insist on staying with the youngest son, the one who worked the hardest just to make ends meet? Vanessa couldn't stop asking herself those questions. Even so, she never showed that frustration in front of Brenda. After thinking about it for many days, she finally came to a decision. There was no point resisting something she couldn't change. Instead of holding on to her resentment, she would learn to accept it. Only then could she live in peace. Otherwise, she would only become the kind of daughter-in-law she never wanted to be. From that day on, Vanessa treated Brenda with even more warmth than before. Brenda was happy to see the care James and Vanessa showed her. Whenever the two of them cooked together, Brenda would tell Vanessa stories about the past, about the years when she and Robert had almost nothing and worked day and night to raise their 3 sons. She talked about how hard it had been to pay school tuition and provide for the family. Michael and Anthony had understood their parents' struggles from a young age, so they studied hard and eventually built successful businesses. They loved and respected their mother, but work left them with very little time to stay by her side. Brenda also told Vanessa that James had never stood out the way his brothers had. He had been an average student, and after graduating, he found a regular job at a small company with an ordinary income. Listening to those stories helped Vanessa understand Brenda much better. The more she learned about her mother-in-law, the more respect she felt for her. A year went by. The company where James worked began struggling, and with fewer orders coming in, his salary was cut. Every time the mortgage payment was due, he had to find a way to make ends meet. Sometimes he even had to use part of the money Vanessa had set aside for their household expenses. Seeing how difficult things had become, Vanessa said to him one day, "Why don't we ask Michael and Anthony to lend us a little money? If they each help us out, we can pay off the mortgage and stop worrying about it. When we're back on our feet, we'll pay them back. They're doing so well. Helping their younger brother a little shouldn't be a problem. Besides, your mom is living with us now." James shook his head. "If we're having a hard time, we'll deal with it ourselves. I don't like asking my brothers for help, and don't use Mom living with us as a reason to bring this up. I don't want them getting the wrong idea. If you borrow money, you have to pay it back. I'd rather owe someone outside the family. But no one else is going to lend us that much. Your paycheck isn't even enough to cover the mortgage now. What are we supposed to do? Leave it to me. I'll figure something out." James refused to change his mind. Vanessa had no choice but to let the subject go. She hadn't suggested borrowing money because she wanted to take advantage of his brothers. She only wanted to ease the pressure they were under. Still, James had always hated depending on his family, and sometimes that stubborn streak frustrated her. She let out a quiet sigh. Marrying a man with such a strong sense of pride wasn't always easy. Even so, she started working extra hours to help support the family. She knew James wasn't the kind of man who made a lot of money, but he had a kind heart. He was honest, thoughtful, and always cared for both his wife and his mother. He also enjoyed helping other people. Before Robert passed away, James used to drive back to Liberty often to visit his parents. Whenever he came home, he also stopped by Vanessa's parents' house. If he bought something nice, he always brought enough to share with both families. He treated them equally, unlike some men who only cared about their own parents and ignored their wife's family. That was one of the reasons so many people respected him. Vanessa's parents loved him as if he were their own son. Vanessa felt proud to have married a man like him. She also remembered the day Brenda said she wanted to move in with them after Robert's death. Even though James was the youngest son, he agreed without hesitation. He never compared himself with his brothers or complained about who should carry more responsibility. To him, taking care of their mother was every child's duty. If his older brothers were busier than he was, then he would do more. There was nothing unfair about that. James's independent nature and the respect he showed everyone around him inspired Vanessa. As time passed, she admired and loved him even more. After Brenda moved in with James and Vanessa, her mood improved a great deal. Their townhouse was small, and sometimes it felt a little crowded, but she never wanted to live with her other sons. She insisted on staying with James and Vanessa. James worked for a private company and earned about $4,000 a month. Vanessa made a little less than that working at the convenience store. Brenda hated seeing the two of them work so hard while carrying such a heavy mortgage. Every month, she received her pension and handed all of it to Vanessa to help with household expenses and the mortgage payments. Vanessa accepted it with a smile. She knew it was her mother-in-law's way of showing love for her children. Because Brenda took care of the cooking and the housework, Vanessa had enough free time to work extra hours. Every month, she was able to contribute more toward the mortgage alongside James. Life settled into a peaceful routine for the three of them until the day the family gathered in Liberty to remember Robert. Everyone was there. After dinner, Brenda made an announcement that surprised them all. She said she was transferring ownership of the family property in Liberty to James and Vanessa. Michael and Anthony stayed quiet. They understood why their mother had made that decision. Their wives, however, didn't look pleased. Brenda noticed their expressions and spoke before anyone could object. "I'm giving this property to James and Vanessa for a reason. First, Michael and Anthony are both doing very well. They already have beautiful homes and successful businesses. Second, I've been living with James and Vanessa. They've taken care of me, and they've never complained. They deserve this. Does anyone have a problem with my decision?" "No, Mom," everyone answered. The two daughters-in-law never had the chance to say a word. Vanessa stared at Brenda in surprise. She had never expected her mother-in-law to treat them with such generosity. She couldn't help thinking that kindness truly came back to those who gave it. James and she had cared for Brenda with all their hearts, and Brenda had returned that love in her own way. Vanessa remembered how resentful she had been when Brenda first wanted to move in with them. Thinking back on those days filled her with embarrassment. She was grateful she had changed before it was too late. Otherwise, she would never have understood the depth of Brenda's love. From that day on, Vanessa treasured her mother-in-law even more. She no longer saw Brenda as her husband's mother. She saw her as her own. Whenever something good or bad happened, Brenda was the first person she wanted to talk to, and Brenda always gave her thoughtful advice. There were times when James and Vanessa argued, and Brenda always handled the situation fairly. More than once, she even defended her daughter-in-law in front of her own son. She never scolded Vanessa or blamed her without reason. Because of Brenda, their home was usually filled with peace and laughter. Vanessa still remembered one particular argument. One night, James went out drinking with his friends and didn't come home until very late. When he finally walked through the door, he threw up all over the house. Vanessa spent nearly the entire night cleaning after him. The smell of food mixed with alcohol filled every room. As she cleaned, she couldn't stop complaining under her breath. The next morning, she was still upset. When James woke up, she started talking about it again. After listening to her from the night before until the next morning, James finally lost his temper. "Will you stop talking already? You just keep going and going," Vanessa fired back. "I'm talking too much? You came home drunk, threw up all over the house, and I spent the whole night cleaning up after you. Am I wrong for saying something? Fine. I don't have a brain. I threw up wherever I wanted. So what? James snapped. If you don't like it, then leave. Those words hit Vanessa hard. Tears filled her eyes. She stamped her foot and shouted back. So this is your house, is that it? Fine, I'll leave. She rushed to the closet, grabbed a few changes of clothes, stuffed them into a suitcase, and headed for the front door. Just as she reached it, she stopped. Brenda was standing there. It was obvious she had heard everything. She looked at Vanessa and asked, "Where are you going?" "I don't know. James told me to leave. I don't want to stay here anymore." Brenda nodded. "Wait here for a minute." She went straight back to her room. Even though Vanessa was still angry with James, she couldn't help wondering what her mother-in-law was about to do. Brenda had heard the entire argument, yet she hadn't scolded either of them. Now, instead of stopping her from leaving, she had asked her to wait. Vanessa stood quietly by the door, waiting for Brenda to come back. About 5 minutes later, Brenda came back out of her room with a stack of cash in her hand. "Here," she said, slipping the money into Vanessa's jacket pocket. "Take it and go enjoy yourself for a few days. Come home whenever you're ready. He needs to learn how to treat his wife with respect." Vanessa stared at her in disbelief. She had never imagined her mother-in-law would handle the situation this way. I really should go?" she asked. "Don't be afraid. I'm on your side," Brenda replied. Vanessa nodded. She wiped the remaining tears from her face, thanked Brenda, and walked out of the house. She had no idea where to go. Going back to her parents' house wasn't an option because she didn't want them to worry. She didn't have any close friends in Kansas City either. After standing outside for a while, she hailed a taxi and asked the driver to take her to an entertainment district downtown. She decided she wouldn't come home until she had spent every dollar Brenda had given her. She wanted James to find out what it felt like to live without her. Later that afternoon, she checked into a small hotel. Once she was inside her room, she counted the money Brenda had given her. $800. She couldn't help smiling. My mother-in-law really is one of a kind. She put the money back into her suitcase, took a shower, and made up her mind not to turn on her phone. She wouldn't answer anyone until she was ready to go home. The next day, she used Brenda's money to treat herself. She got her hair done, had a manicure and a pedicure, and even picked a bright nail color on purpose. She wanted to tease James when she finally came back. 3 days passed. James had spent every one of them regretting what he had said. He couldn't reach Vanessa because her phone was turned off. Seeing her son pacing around the house, Brenda said, "Now you know what it feels like when someone's gone. That's how life works. You can have a drink once in a while, but don't overdo it. And when your wife gets upset, let her talk. Don't answer her with hurtful words." "I know, Mom," James said. "I was wrong. As soon as Vanessa comes home, I'm going to apologize. I just wish I knew where she was," Brenda shrugged. "I don't know either. She'll come back when she's ready." James lowered his head. More than anything, he wanted his wife to walk through the front door so he could tell her how sorry he was. Late on the 3rd day after Vanessa left, she finally came home. The first person to see her was Brenda. She looked Vanessa up and down, smiled, and said, "I'm glad you're back." Vanessa lowered her head. "I'm sorry, Mom." Brenda walked over, gave her shoulder a gentle pat, and said, "It's good that you know where you were wrong. Women love their husbands very deeply, but when an argument starts, it's easy to say things that cut too deeply, that only pushes a man farther away. A gentle approach will always go further. You're a woman. Hold on to the good qualities that make a family stronger. That's how a marriage lasts." "I understand, Mom. I'll remember that," Vanessa replied. Brenda nodded, then deliberately raised her voice. "James, Vanessa's home!" She spoke loudly enough for him to hear from inside the house. James rushed out of the bedroom the moment he heard his mother's voice. As soon as he saw Vanessa, he froze. Her new hairstyle, her polished nails, and the smile on her face caught him completely off guard. "Where have you been? And what happened to you?" Vanessa smiled. "I went out, relaxed, and gave myself a makeover." "You don't like how I look?" "No, I do. I really do," James answered quickly. The truth was, he wasn't used to seeing her like that, but there was no way he was going to say anything except the right answer. Vanessa glanced at Brenda. Brenda gave her a playful wink before heading into the kitchen. James stepped forward, took Vanessa's suitcase with one hand, held her other hand with his, and led her back to their room. From that day on, James and Vanessa rarely argued. Even when they got upset, both of them tried to stay calm and avoided saying things that would hurt each other. James loved his wife, respected his mother, and knew Brenda would always stand up for Vanessa when he was wrong. Sometimes he joked, "The two of you always team up against me. I never stand a chance." Brenda laughed. "At least you know that," James smiled. He was only teasing. Having a mother and a wife who cared for each other so much made him feel fortunate. Brenda and Vanessa looked at his embarrassed expression and burst into laughter together. Another year passed. It had already been 3 years since Robert passed away. As his memorial anniversary approached, Brenda said to the family, "This year, I'd like to hold a proper memorial gathering for your father back in Liberty. We'll invite our relatives, neighbors, and old friends to share a meal together. I've been living in Kansas City, and I hardly ever get the chance to see everyone anymore." "Whatever you decide, Mom, we'll support you," James replied. "I've already talked to your brothers," Brenda said. "I'm just letting you know now so everyone has time to make arrangements. We'll need to drive back the day before to get everything ready." "Of course, Mom." Early the next morning, James, Vanessa, and Brenda drove back to Liberty. Michael and Anthony said they wouldn't arrive until later that evening because of work. Although Vanessa was the youngest daughter-in-law, she worked alongside Brenda preparing everything for the gathering. The guest list and the menu had already been planned the day before, so there wasn't much rush when they arrived. Brenda asked Vanessa to arrange the catering and buy fruit and flowers for the memorial table, while James went around inviting relatives and neighbors. Brenda stayed home, cleaned the house, and prepared the memorial corner. The next day, the food was delivered, and relatives, neighbors, and family friends filled the house. Everyone was happy to see one another after such a long time apart. As they watched Vanessa moving from table to table, making sure every guest was taken care of, many of them smiled and said, "Brenda, you're truly blessed. Your sons are successful, and your youngest daughter-in-law is so capable. You barely have to lift a finger." Brenda smiled proudly. "Vanessa is the greatest blessing this family could have asked for. Honestly, I don't know what I'd do without her." Hearing those words warmed Vanessa's heart. She couldn't help thinking how lucky she was to have such an amazing mother-in-law. Sometimes it even felt as though Brenda spoiled her more than her own mother did. Vanessa's parents had also come to the gathering. Listening to everyone praise their daughter filled them with pride. Her father smiled and said, "Vanessa has always been a good kid. She grew up kind and respectful, and now she's been blessed with a mother-in-law who loves and guides her like her own daughter. We couldn't ask for more." Vanessa listened as one person after another praised her. Every compliment made her want to care for Brenda even more. She promised herself she would do everything she could to repay the love Brenda had always given her. People often say that the youngest son and his wife end up carrying all the responsibility of looking after aging parents while the oldest son receives the recognition. Vanessa used to think that way too, but her family was different. Michael, Anthony, and their wives respected her because she had taken on the responsibility of caring for Brenda without complaint. They never looked down on her or treated her unfairly. They knew that if Vanessa stepped away, no one else would be able to care for Brenda the way she did. She had earned everyone's respect, and Brenda had entrusted James and Vanessa with the family property. Vanessa often thought about how fortunate she was. There couldn't be many women who married into a family and were treated the way she had been. She sometimes wondered if she had done something good in another life to deserve a mother-in-law like Brenda. With those thoughts in mind, she happily walked from table to table, checking whether any guests needed more food or drinks. It wasn't until around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, after the last guest had gone home, that she finally sat down to rest. The moment she lowered herself onto the bed, she heard James calling from outside. His voice sounded a little unsteady from the alcohol. "Vanessa, aren't you coming out to clean up?" Vanessa frowned. "The catering company will take care of everything. We don't have to clean up. They still need the tables and dishes gathered together before they pick everything up." Hearing that irritated her. She couldn't tell whether James was drunk or simply trying to make her do more work. The food had been catered, and the staff would come back to collect everything themselves. Why was he insisting that she go outside? Just as Vanessa was about to get up and argue with him, Brenda stepped in. James, if you've had too much to drink, then go lie down. We hired a catering company. Why are you asking your wife to clean up? But it's such a mess, Mom. Then let it stay that way until the staff gets here. Your wife has been on her feet since yesterday. Let her rest for a while. After speaking to her son, Brenda walked to Vanessa's room and called through the doorway. Stay where you are and get some rest. This afternoon, you and I are going to wash our hair and get a massage. Leave James alone. He's just had too much to drink. Okay, Mom, Vanessa smiled. She stayed in bed just as Brenda had told her. By the time she woke up later that afternoon, the catering staff had already packed everything away. All that was left for her to do was sweep the house and the yard. After that, she and Brenda went out together. They didn't get back until around 6 that evening. By then, Michael and Anthony had already driven back to Kansas City. Only James, Vanessa, and Brenda stayed in Liberty until the next morning. That night, the three of them sat down for dinner together. Brenda kept placing food on Vanessa's plate. Eat more, sweetheart. You've hardly had a chance to eat anything all day. Family gatherings like this are exhausting. Vanessa smiled. It wasn't that bad, Mom. We had everything catered, so it was much easier. Brenda shook her head. Even with the catering, there were still plenty of things that needed to be done. You barely stopped moving from yesterday until now. Vanessa smiled again. At that moment, she thought to herself that choosing the right husband mattered, but having a mother-in-law like Brenda was just as great a blessing. Over the next few years, life for Vanessa, James, and Brenda remained peaceful and happy. By the 3rd year after moving to Kansas City, most of their mortgage had been paid off. Vanessa finally said to James, "Maybe it's time for us to have a baby." They stopped using birth control, expecting that good news would come soon. But 2 years passed, and Vanessa still wasn't pregnant. They went to the hospital for a full checkup. The doctor told them that both of them were perfectly healthy and capable of having children naturally. Hearing that gave them hope again. They went home and decided not to put too much pressure on themselves. They would simply let nature take its course. At last, their long-awaited miracle arrived. About 6 months later, Vanessa found out she was pregnant. James was overjoyed. Brenda couldn't stop smiling. The whole family looked forward to welcoming a new member. But that happiness didn't last long. When Vanessa was 2 months pregnant, she suddenly suffered a miscarriage. She was devastated. After waiting so many years, she had finally conceived, only to lose the baby. James and Brenda were heartbroken as well, but they stayed by her side and comforted her. They kept telling her there would be other chances and that one day she would hold a healthy baby in her arms. Their encouragement helped Vanessa regain some hope. She believed she would become a mother one day, but life had something else in store. Every time she became pregnant after that, she lost the baby within the first few months. Over the next 4 years, Vanessa suffered 3 miscarriages. No one could explain why. She and James visited specialist after specialist. Whenever someone recommended a new treatment or a new doctor, they tried it. They spent a great deal of money searching for answers, but nothing changed. In the end, they still couldn't have a child. Vanessa slowly fell into despair. Day after day, she cried and blamed herself for what had happened. Seeing her in so much pain, both James and Brenda did everything they could to comfort her. Brenda would often say, "Life brings joy to some people and hardship to others. Maybe having children is simply the challenge you've been given. Don't lose hope, sweetheart. As long as you keep believing, I know happier days will come." Mom, Vanessa couldn't finish her sentence. She broke down in tears again. Brenda wrapped her arms around her and held her close. She knew how deeply her daughter-in-law was hurting. James loved Vanessa just as much. Neither he nor Brenda ever pressured her about having children. Even so, Vanessa couldn't stop blaming herself. She believed that as a wife, she should be able to give her husband a child. Without that, she felt she had failed him. Many nights, James would wake up and find Vanessa hugging a pillow, crying quietly in the dark. Every time he saw her like that, his heart ached. He wasn't nearly as sad about not having children as he was about watching the woman he loved suffer. To him, having Vanessa was enough. Whether they ever became parents didn't matter nearly as much as spending the rest of his life with her. His two older brothers already had children. The family name would continue even if he never became a father. Thinking that way, James pulled Vanessa into his arms, rested her head against his chest, and whispered, "Don't cry anymore. I don't need you to give me a child. As long as we have each other, that's enough for me." Vanessa shook her head through her tears. "But I want us to have a baby. Why is this happening to me? What have I ever done to deserve this?" She buried her face against him and cried until her tears soaked his shirt. The more she thought about it, the more unfair life seemed. Years earlier, they had postponed having children so they could focus on paying off their mortgage. She had believed that once the debt was behind them, everything would finally fall into place. Now they had a home, a loving husband, and a wonderful mother-in-law. Yet the one thing she wanted most remained out of reach. What hurt even more were the comments she heard from other people. Whenever she visited relatives or returned to Liberty, someone would always ask why she still didn't have children after so many years of marriage. Others were even cruel enough to say that if she couldn't have a baby, she should leave James so he could marry someone else. Those words cut deeper than anyone realized. They made her dread leaving the house. She stopped wanting to visit Liberty. She avoided seeing people because she was afraid of hearing those same remarks again. They were only words, but they slowly wore away her spirit and left wounds no one else could see. After many days of struggling with her thoughts, Vanessa made a decision. She wanted to divorce James. Before telling him, she decided to speak with Brenda first. She knew the news would be a shock, and she wanted her mother-in-law to hear it from her. One day, while they were alone at home, Vanessa lowered her head and said softly, "Mom, I want to divorce James." Brenda's face changed at once. Her heart skipped a beat, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Why? Has James done something to hurt you? Or have I done something wrong?" "No, Mom. Neither you nor James has ever treated me badly. You've both been so good to me. That's exactly why I feel so guilty. I've been your daughter-in-law for almost 10 years, and I still haven't been able to give this family a child. We've tried everything. We've spent so much money, but nothing has worked. I want to leave so James can marry someone else and have the family he deserves." Brenda looked at her for a long moment before asking, "Have you really thought this through?" Vanessa nodded. "Yes, Mom." Brenda took a slow breath. "That may be what you want, but neither James nor I will ever agree to it. James isn't my only son. I have 3 sons, and I already have grandchildren. If you and James never have children, that doesn't change how I feel. I'm not upset about it. All I want is for the two of you to live happily together. That's enough for me. So I will never accept a divorce just because you can't have children. If you came to me and said the two of you had fallen out of love, that would be different. But not this. Stop blaming yourself. Be strong. Everything will work out in its own time." Vanessa nodded through her tears. Brenda's words were firm, but every sentence was filled with love and compassion. They gave Vanessa the strength to believe in life again. She decided she would keep protecting her marriage, even if she never became a mother. After that conversation, Vanessa slowly became herself again. She stopped dwelling on the fact that she couldn't have children. Family members and friends encouraged her and James to try IVF, but every miscarriage had left scars that still haunted her. She couldn't bring herself to go through it. From then on, she stopped chasing treatments. She and James decided they would simply live happily together. If God chose to bless them with a child one day, they would welcome that gift. If not, they would still be grateful for the life they had. 2 more years passed. Vanessa turned 32, and she still had never given birth. Even so, she and James continued to build a happy life together. It was an early winter day in 2018. Vanessa got off work earlier than usual. On her way home, she stopped by a grocery store and bought a carp because she wanted to make James's favorite sweet and sour fish soup for dinner. Just as she arrived home, James called. He told her his company was having a dinner party that evening, so he would be home late and wouldn't be eating with them. That night, only Vanessa and Brenda sat down for dinner together. After they finished eating and cleaned up the kitchen, Vanessa took a shower and went to her room. Around 10 o'clock, just as she was getting into bed, her phone rang. It was James's number. She picked up right away, but the voice on the other end wasn't his. "Hello, who is this?" she asked. The man didn't tell her his name. Instead, he spoke quickly. "Are you the wife of the owner of this phone?" "Yes." "Your husband has been in a serious car accident. He was just taken to City General Hospital. Please come as quickly as you can." Before Vanessa could ask another question, the call ended. Her phone slipped from her hand and hit the floor. The color drained from her face. Her whole body shook. Her legs gave way beneath her, and she collapsed onto the floor. The only word she managed to cry out was, "Mom." Then everything went dark. Brenda was in the living room watching television while waiting for James to come home. The moment she heard Vanessa call out, she hurried toward the bedroom. "Vanessa, what's wrong?" she called as she rushed inside. When she pushed the door open, she found Vanessa lying unconscious on the floor beside the bed. "Vanessa!" Brenda knelt beside her and tried to wake her, but there was no response. Terrified, she ran outside and knocked on the neighbors' doors, asking for help. Several neighbors rushed over at once. They carried Vanessa to the car and took her to the emergency room. Brenda hurried back inside to grab some cash and Vanessa's phone so she could call James. Her hands were shaking so badly that it took several tries before she managed to make the call. When someone finally answered, it wasn't James. It was a nurse. Thinking she was speaking to James's wife, the nurse said quickly, "Are you a family member of James? Please come to the hospital right away. He's been in a very serious accident." Brenda couldn't say a single word. She sank to the floor. Her head was spinning, and her heart felt as if it would burst from her chest. After a few moments, she forced herself to stay calm enough to pick up the phone again. This time, she called Michael. When Vanessa regained consciousness, her relatives were already taking her back to Liberty. Throughout the drive, she kept crying and asking what had happened to James. The relatives sitting beside her kept saying the same thing. "James is fine. He was only hurt a little. He's already back home resting. We're taking you there now." Sitting in the car, Vanessa couldn't stop thinking about the phone call from the night before. The man on the phone had said James's injuries were very serious. Why were her relatives now telling her he was only slightly hurt? Were they hiding something from her? She kept asking, but they gave her the same answer every time. Believing them, she sat quietly and waited to see her husband. As the car reached the road leading to James's family home, one of her cousins told the driver to head toward her house in the next town instead. Vanessa heard every word. She exploded at once. She knew something terrible had happened. Otherwise, why would they keep her away from home? She screamed, struggled, and fought so hard that the driver had no choice but to stop the car. Realizing they couldn't hide the truth any longer, her cousin finally told her what had happened and took her home. The house Brenda had given to James and Vanessa in Liberty was already filled with people. Even before Vanessa stepped through the gate, she could hear heartbreaking cries coming from inside the house. Conversations filled the yard and spilled out to the front entrance. Her heart sank. She pushed the car door open and ran inside as fast as she could. James was lying in the center of the room. Several uncles and relatives were preparing his body for the funeral. Vanessa let out a heartbreaking cry and threw herself over him. "James! James!" She held him tightly and shook him over and over. "Please don't leave me. Don't leave me here by myself. James, take me with you." Her cries grew weaker and weaker until they became nothing more than sobs. Everyone around her was in tears. No one could bear the sight of a young wife saying goodbye to the man she loved. About half an hour later, Vanessa had no strength left. Some of the older men gently led her out of the room so they could continue preparing James for the funeral service. That afternoon, countless relatives, friends, neighbors, and co-workers came to pay their respects. They mourned the loss of a good man whose life had ended far too soon. They grieved for Brenda, a mother forced to bury her own son. Vanessa cried until she had no tears left, but James never opened his eyes again. He had once told her that the two of them didn't need children as long as they had each other. Now he had broken that promise. He had left her behind forever. Vanessa felt a crushing pain in her chest and struggled to breathe. She couldn't believe the man who had never once broken a promise to her was truly gone. James had died in the accident that night. After the company dinner, he drove home after drinking. He was traveling too fast when his car left the road and crashed into a concrete roadside marker. Someone found him and called for help, but the doctors couldn't save him. He left behind his elderly mother, his young wife, and the future they had dreamed of together. On the day James was laid to rest, a huge crowd gathered to say goodbye. Everyone mourned a life that had ended just after he had turned 30. After James passed away, Vanessa stayed in Liberty and never returned to Kansas City. Brenda stayed there as well. Michael had offered more than once to bring his mother to live with his family in Kansas City, but she always refused. She only said one thing: "I'm staying with Vanessa. Wherever she is, that's where I'll be." One was an elderly widow, the other a young widow. The two women leaned on each other and slowly found the strength to live with the loss they both carried. Before they realized it, more than a year had passed since James's death. Little by little, both Vanessa and Brenda became stronger. They no longer spent every day crying. One day, Brenda said to her daughter-in-law, "The people we've lost are gone, sweetheart. The ones who are still here have to keep living." "I know, Mom," Vanessa replied. She understood exactly what Brenda meant. Her mother-in-law was holding back her own grief just to encourage her. Deep inside, Brenda was hurting every bit as much as she was. Vanessa knew Brenda had stayed in Liberty because of her. She was afraid Vanessa would be left all alone and lose the will to live. Vanessa had married young, never had children, and the person she loved most in the world was gone. Brenda wanted to stay beside her for as long as she could, to be the support Vanessa needed for the rest of her life. One day, while visiting a neighbor, Vanessa heard something that caught her off guard. "Vanessa, I heard your mother-in-law already transferred the family property into your and James's names. Is that true?" "Yes. Why do you ask?" "I've been hearing people say that your brothers-in-law might want it back. They say James is gone and you don't have any children, so you shouldn't keep property that belongs to their family." Vanessa sat quietly for a moment after hearing those words. Then she said, "The property is still there. I haven't sold it, and I never will. It's where my father-in-law and James are remembered. I don't think my brothers-in-law need to worry about that." The neighbor nodded. "I believe you, but if I were you, I'd tell your mother-in-law and your brothers-in-law exactly how you feel. That way, there won't be any misunderstandings." "You're right," Vanessa replied. The next day, Vanessa told Brenda about what the neighbor had said. She also told her that she wanted to return the family property. "Mom, James is gone, and we never had children. I'd like to give the property back to the family. The townhouse in Kansas City belongs to James and me, so I'll sell that one if I need to. But this property should go back to the family." Brenda shook her head right away. "No. I transferred it to you and James because I wanted you to have it. Now that James is gone, it belongs to you. I won't take it back." Vanessa gently held Brenda's hand. "Then promise me one thing. Please don't let me keep it forever. One day, when I'm old, transfer it to Michael's oldest son. He'll be the one who looks after the family memorials and carries on the family traditions. For now, I'll stay here because I don't have another place to live. But when I'm gone, the property should belong to the next generation." Brenda looked at Vanessa for a long time before slowly nodding. Later, when Michael and Anthony came home, Vanessa shared her decision with everyone. Both brothers respected her even more after hearing what she had to say. They had never expected a young widow to think so carefully about the future of their family. Brenda and her sons all told Vanessa the same thing. "You're still young. If someone truly loves you, don't be afraid to marry again." Vanessa smiled and shook her head. "I don't want to get married again. I want to stay here and take care of Mom for all of you." Brenda looked at her with gentle eyes. "But I'm getting older. One day I'll be gone too. Your brothers-in-law have families of their own. You'll be all alone." Vanessa reached for Brenda's hand and held it tightly. "I'm not afraid of being alone. I'm only afraid that one day I won't be your daughter-in-law anymore." Those words brought tears to Brenda's eyes. By then, there was no longer any distance between them. Brenda no longer thought of Vanessa as her daughter-in-law, and Vanessa no longer saw Brenda as her mother-in-law. They had truly become mother and daughter. From that day on, Vanessa and Brenda lived together in peace. They laughed often and treated each other with complete honesty. If Brenda noticed something she didn't like, she said it right away and never kept it bottled up. Vanessa was the same. If something bothered her, she spoke to Brenda openly instead of hiding it. Since it was just the two of them living under one roof, they even joked around with each other from time to time. Their neighbors often smiled and said, "Those two don't act like a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law." They're more like sisters. Others would reply, that's why they get along so well. If they spent all day watching every word and every move, they'd only make each other miserable. People often said mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law were difficult by nature, but Vanessa never felt that way. Living with Brenda made her happier than she had ever been living in her own parents' house. The only sadness she carried was losing James and never having children. If those two things hadn't happened, she believed she would have been the happiest woman in the world. Sometime after James's death, Vanessa found a job at a small family restaurant near home. The work was tiring, and sometimes she had to make deliveries, but she didn't mind. Good jobs were hard to find in Liberty, and she was grateful to have steady work. She worked the morning shift, waking up at 5 every day to help prepare breakfast. After that, she got lunch ready and helped with the afternoon meals before handing everything over to the next shift. Most days she finished around noon, though she sometimes stayed later when the restaurant was busy. One afternoon, she finished work earlier than usual. On the way home, she stopped by the market and wandered from stall to stall. She bought some fruit, several dozen eggs, a bag of potatoes, and a few other groceries. As she walked past a clothing store, the owner kept inviting her inside. Not wanting to refuse, Vanessa ended up buying 2 matching sets of lightweight summer clothes, one for herself and one for Brenda. After lunch, she changed into her new outfit, picked up the other set, and walked outside. "Mom, I bought this for you. It'll be nice and cool to wear. I got one for me and one for you." Brenda turned around as soon as she heard Vanessa calling. The moment she saw the outfit Vanessa was wearing, she frowned. "What on earth are you wearing?" "A tank top," Vanessa answered with a grin. "I bought one for you too. Mine is yellow and yours is brown. Brown suits you better." She held out the outfit she had bought for Brenda. Brenda gave her a look. "Take that thing back." "I'm not wearing it," Vanessa blinked. "Why not? It's cute and it's nice and cool." "Cute? That top shows far too much, and those shorts are way too short." Vanessa laughed. "Mom, it's just the two of us at home. What's wrong with dressing comfortably? You worry too much." Brenda folded her arms. "When we lived in Kansas City, plenty of people dressed like that, so there was no point saying anything. But this is Liberty. People don't dress like that here. If you walk around wearing those clothes, you'll only give the neighbors something to gossip about." Vanessa pouted. "You've changed so much. Back in Kansas City, you never complained. Now all of a sudden you won't let me wear them." Brenda pointed a finger at her. "I've changed because we're living somewhere different. City life and small-town life aren't the same. Stop arguing with me," Vanessa laughed. "If someone really came along, you'd lose your daughter-in-law." Brenda smiled back. "If that happened, I'd probably be happy for you." "Come on, Mom. You're already in your 30s, and I still have to remind you about these things." Vanessa picked up the outfit Brenda had refused and carried it back inside. Even though she had argued with Brenda, she kept thinking about what her mother-in-law had said. Brenda was right. Things were different now. She no longer lived in the city, and she wasn't a married woman anymore. If she dressed too boldly, people in town would start talking. Some might even say she was trying to attract another man because she was widowed. Vanessa sighed. After that day, she never wore that outfit again. The next morning, Vanessa got up early and went to work as usual. Around noon, she called home. "Hi, Mom. The restaurant's really busy today, so I probably won't make it home for lunch. Go ahead and eat without me, okay? Don't wait." Brenda smiled as she held the phone to her ear. "I told you not to keep running back and forth in this heat. Stay there, finish your work, and come home when it's cooler." Vanessa laughed. "If I don't come home, you'll get lonely and skip lunch. Then you'll end up getting sick, and I won't have time to sit with you at the hospital." Brenda pretended to sound annoyed. "If you don't come take care of me, then just let me die." Vanessa burst into laughter. "There you go again. You're as healthy as ever. You don't get sick that easily." Brenda laughed too. "If I ever got sick, you'd wear yourself out taking care of me, so I'd better stay healthy. Now get back to work. I don't have all day to chat with you." She ended the call with a smile still on her face. Sometimes Brenda stopped and wondered when she and Vanessa had started talking to each other like this. It seemed to have happened about a year after James passed away. The two of them were mother and daughter, yet many of their conversations sounded more like two close friends teasing each other. It made life feel lighter. One day, a neighbor asked Brenda, Aren't you worried you're too easygoing with your daughter-in-law? What if she starts taking advantage of you? Brenda smiled. That's exactly why we get along so well. We've lived together for years. I know what kind of person she is. If I treat her well, she'll treat me the same way. Tell me, what reason would either of us have to make life difficult for the other? If I treated her the way some mothers-in-law used to treat their daughters-in-law, she would have left a long time ago. The neighbor nodded. You're right. If Vanessa weren't such a good person, she would have gone back to her own family years ago. Who would stay and take care of a mother-in-law all these years otherwise? Brenda's way of thinking gradually influenced many of the women in the neighborhood. They realized their relationships with their own daughters-in-law became much easier after they stopped trying to control every little thing. They often said, times have changed. If you have a daughter-in-law, you have to treat her well. If you make her miserable, the one who suffers most in the end is your own son. Life settled into a quiet routine for Brenda and Vanessa. Every morning, Vanessa left for work while Brenda stayed home, cleaning the house, tending the vegetable garden, and feeding the chickens. Even though the family still owned plenty of land and never had to worry about money, the two of them continued living simply in the old house where Brenda and Robert had spent most of their lives together. Michael and Anthony invited Brenda to move back to Kansas City many times, but she always turned them down. I'm used to living here with Vanessa, she would tell them. She's the one who understands me best. I don't want to live anywhere else. One morning, while Vanessa was at work, her parents came to visit. As soon as Brenda saw them, she welcomed them inside. Samuel, Patricia, come in. Have a seat. Patricia looked around the house before asking, has Vanessa already gone to work? Yes, she leaves before 5 every morning. Brenda poured tea for them. Samuel parked his truck outside, then joined the two women at the old wooden table in the living room. They chatted for a while before Brenda smiled and said, since you're already here, why don't you stay for lunch? I'll call Vanessa home, catch one of our chickens, and cook something nice. It's been a long time since we've all eaten together. Samuel waved his hand. No, don't trouble yourself. We actually came because we wanted to talk to you about something. Once we're finished, we'll head home. Our grandchildren are waiting for us. Brenda nodded. Go ahead. I'm listening. Samuel sat quietly for a few seconds before speaking. Robert has been gone for several years now. Vanessa is still young. She deserves to think about her future. As her parents, it hurts us to see her living alone like this. One day, you and I will both be gone. Who will she have then? He paused, unable to continue. Brenda already understood what he was trying to say. I know what you're getting at, she said gently. I've talked to Vanessa many times about getting married again, but she won't listen. I can't force her, Patricia sighed. We've tried talking to her too, but she won't change her mind. That's why we came today. We'd like to take her home for a while. There's a man in our neighborhood who's interested in meeting her. Brenda gave a slow nod. There's nothing wrong with letting someone get to know her. But tell me about him. What's his situation? Samuel replied. He's 7 or 8 years older than Vanessa. He's divorced and lives with his elderly mother. He owns a small grocery store and makes a decent living. Brenda thought for a moment before asking another question. Why did his marriage end? Samuel shook his head. I don't know the whole story. From what I've heard, his ex-wife had a difficult personality, and his mother eventually asked her to leave. Brenda's expression became more thoughtful. If that's all we know, then we need to be careful. A marriage doesn't always fall apart because of the wife. The husband could have been part of the problem too. We should find out more before letting Vanessa meet him. Samuel nodded. You're right. I'll ask around and find out more. Brenda looked at him and added, Don't rush this just because Vanessa has been alone for a few years. If she marries the wrong man, she'll end up suffering all over again. I'd rather see her stay single than marry someone who doesn't truly deserve her. Samuel fell silent. He understood why Brenda was being so careful. After everything Vanessa had been through, no one wanted to see her hurt again. Before leaving, Brenda said one more thing. If the man is truly decent, I'll be the first one to encourage Vanessa to give him a chance. But if there's anything questionable about him, I won't let her take that risk. Samuel agreed and went home with Patricia. Over the next few days, he quietly asked around about the man. The more he learned, the more disappointed he became. The man's divorce hadn't happened because of his ex-wife alone. He had a habit of gambling, and whenever he lost money, he would take his anger out on his family. His wife had endured it for years before finally filing for divorce. As soon as Samuel learned the truth, he gave up on the idea completely. A few days later, he returned to Brenda's house and told her everything he had found out. Brenda let out a quiet sigh. "I'm glad we didn't let Vanessa meet him. Otherwise, she might have walked into another unhappy marriage," Samuel nodded. "You were right. We needed to look deeper instead of believing what people said on the surface." Brenda smiled faintly. Finding the right person is never something that should be rushed. Vanessa has already suffered enough. If she ever marries again, it has to be someone who will cherish her for the rest of her life. Otherwise, I'd rather she stay here with me. Samuel frowned. If we wait until Vanessa agrees on her own, she'll never remarry. That's why we have to make the decision for her. I've already made up my mind. She has to get married. A woman needs a husband to lean on when she gets older. She can't spend the rest of her life alone. Samuel could no longer hold back. He said everything that had been weighing on his mind. Patricia, sitting beside him, noticed that her husband was getting worked up. She quietly pressed her hand against his back, reminding him to calm down. Samuel understood what she meant and softened his tone. "I'm only worried about my daughter. She spent so many years taking care of your family. Now it's time for us to help her find a home of her own." Brenda remained silent. Seeing that she wasn't pleased, Samuel decided not to stay any longer. He and Patricia said goodbye and headed home, but he was still upset. In his mind, James was gone, yet Brenda kept insisting that Vanessa stay with her. He couldn't help thinking she wanted someone to look after her for the rest of her life. As soon as he got home, Samuel called Vanessa. "Come home right now," he said. "What's wrong, Dad?" Vanessa asked. Samuel ignored the question. "Just come home." Then he hung up. Vanessa had no idea why her father sounded so angry. Around noon, after finishing work, she rode straight to her parents' house. The moment she stepped into the yard, she asked, "Mom, what happened?" Dad sounded furious on the phone. She pulled into the driveway, stepped inside, and found Samuel sitting in the living room, smoking his pipe. The moment he saw her, he burst out. "What are you thinking? Why won't you remarry? Are you planning to grow old in that house? And your mother-in-law too? Her son is gone, so why is she still keeping you there? Does she expect you to spend the rest of your life taking care of her?" Vanessa's expression changed. "Dad, please don't talk about Mom like that. I'm your father. I raised you, not her. Yet every time you open your mouth, you defend your mother-in-law. What has she done to make you side with her over your own family? You don't know her, Dad. Mom isn't the kind of person you're making her out to be." Samuel became even more upset. "Of course you'd say that. As far as you're concerned, she's always right, and everything I say is wrong. Fine. Stay there and keep taking care of her if that's what you want. But I won't stand by and watch. I already spoke to your mother-in-law this morning. I told her I was bringing you home so you could meet Chung. If you stay over there with her, no decent man is ever going to come courting you." I barely finished speaking before she started questioning everything. She kept asking why the man was divorced, saying maybe he had problems of his own. In the end, she made it obvious she didn't want you to remarry at all. She'd rather keep you there looking after her than hire someone else. Samuel poured out every complaint he had been holding inside. Vanessa looked straight at him. She could tell how angry he was, but she refused to let him speak unfairly about Brenda. "Dad, if you don't know the truth, please don't say things like that. Mom is nothing like what you're describing. So now your mother-in-law is perfect?" Samuel snapped. "Everything she says is right, and everything I say means nothing to you. Fine. Stay there and keep taking care of her. When you get old, you'll have to deal with the consequences yourself." Patricia had been listening to the argument the whole time. Afraid it would get worse, she stepped between them. "That's enough. Both of you need to calm down. Vanessa isn't a child anymore. Whether she remarries or not is her decision. And your mother-in-law has lived through a lot more than we have. If she's asking us to look into the man first, she's not wrong." Vanessa nodded. "Mom's right, Dad. Brenda has encouraged me to remarry many times. She's even asked people to introduce me to good men. It just hasn't worked out yet. She wanted me to quit my restaurant job because she didn't want me doing such hard work anymore. She even offered to buy me a small storefront so I could run my own business. But I turned her down because I don't know the first thing about running a shop. She takes better care of me than anyone else. I know you're worried about me, Dad, And I know it's because you love me. But marriage depends on fate. If the right person hasn't come along, forcing it won't help. Samuel let out a frustrated sigh. Fate? If you keep waiting for fate, you'll be old before it ever shows up. Vanessa smiled helplessly. Dad, don't underestimate your daughter. Brenda has already introduced several men to me, and I turned every one of them down. Don't think I'm still single because nobody wants me. I just haven't met someone who's right for me. Besides, I can't have children, so I don't want to marry again. Samuel shook his head. You're such a foolish girl. That's exactly why you should remarry. If you marry a man who already has children and treat them well, they'll look after you when you grow old. And medicine has come a long way. Just because you couldn't have children before doesn't mean you'll never be able to. Vanessa smiled but didn't argue anymore. I know you're worried about me, Dad, but please let me decide my own future. I'm going home now. She turned around and walked out of the house. Samuel called after her. Don't forget what I told you! Vanessa didn't answer. She got into her car and drove away. Samuel and Patricia stood in the doorway watching their daughter disappear down the road. Both of them let out a long sigh. Ever since James passed away, seeing Vanessa cry day after day had broken their hearts. She was only in her early 30s, yet she had already become a widow. James's family had always treated her well, but they still couldn't stop worrying about her future. To them, a woman growing old without a husband or children was a lonely path. That was why, after James's memorial anniversary, they had begun encouraging her to remarry. When gentle persuasion didn't work, they decided they had to take matters into their own hands. They believed that if they kept leaving the choice entirely to Vanessa, she would never marry again. Brenda felt exactly the same way as Vanessa's parents. Even though she was James's mother, she loved Vanessa as if she were her own daughter, perhaps even more. People often said that a daughter-in-law would never be the same as a daughter by blood, but Brenda had never believed that. Vanessa had lived beside her for years, sharing every joy and hardship. From the day Vanessa married into the family, Brenda had always cared for her with all her heart. After James passed away, that love only grew stronger. Brenda still remembered the night James was brought home from the hospital after the accident. Vanessa was still unconscious in the emergency room. Brenda cried for her son until she had no tears left, yet she couldn't stop worrying about her daughter-in-law lying alone in the hospital. After James was buried, Vanessa wandered around the house like someone who had lost her soul. Brenda buried her own grief deep inside and forced herself to stay strong because she knew Vanessa needed someone to lean on. From that day until now, the two of them had lived together that way. Brenda never accepted Michael's invitations to move back to Kansas City because she couldn't bear the thought of leaving Vanessa alone. Every time she saw Vanessa sleeping by herself in that quiet house, her heart ached. She often encouraged her to remarry if she ever met the right man, but Vanessa always refused. Worried that time was slipping away, Brenda quietly let people know she hoped to find a good husband for her daughter-in-law. Several men came asking to meet Vanessa, but Brenda never agreed too quickly. She wanted the man who married Vanessa to be truly kind and trustworthy. Only then could she feel at peace. The first man who came was a distant relative from Uncle Thomas's side of the family. He had steady work, spoke politely, and had lost his wife to cancer several years earlier. He was raising a 10-year-old son by himself. After talking with him, Brenda thought he seemed like a decent person. His family background was good, and his manners left a favorable impression. She was almost ready to let him and Vanessa get to know each other. Then, just before the two families were supposed to meet, Uncle Thomas hurried over to stop everything. He had recently learned that his nephew had a serious gambling problem. Even though they were relatives, he refused to let Vanessa become involved with someone who lived that way. Brenda thanked him for telling the truth. Just like that, the first match she had carefully considered came to an end. The second man who came to ask about Vanessa was nearly 50 years old. He told Brenda that he had heard about Vanessa's situation and had come on his own without anyone introducing them. He said he made a living buying and selling whatever the market demanded. Sometimes it was lumber. Other times it was real estate. He spoke confidently about how much money he made and the business opportunities he had. The more he talked, the more cautious Brenda became. The man was tall, well-dressed, and very persuasive. He also made a point of mentioning his high income several times. Brenda couldn't tell whether he truly cared about Vanessa or whether he was interested in the family property, which had become much more valuable over the years. She wasn't sure how much of what he was saying was true, so she decided to test him. A few days later, she invited him over again and quietly asked Uncle Thomas to help her. While the man was enthusiastically describing the wonderful future he would give Vanessa after they married and promising that he would treat Brenda like his own mother, Uncle Thomas walked into the house pretending to be a debt collector. He demanded repayment of an old debt while Brenda acted as though she was struggling to pay him back. Watching his future mother-in-law apologize and make excuses about money, the businessman fell completely silent. He thought to himself, so the rumors weren't true after all. This family isn't wealthy. They're drowning in debt. Good thing I found out before anything became serious. If I married into this family, I'd end up carrying all of those debts myself. He quickly stood up, forced a smile, said goodbye, and promised to visit again another day. Brenda never saw him again. What a smooth talker, she muttered after he disappeared. Some time later, one of Brenda's neighbors tried to introduce Vanessa to her nephew. According to the neighbor, he held an important position in a government office in the northern part of the state. He had been married once to a woman from a rural community, but they had divorced because they weren't compatible. Now he wanted to marry someone from another area, so his aunt offered to make the introduction. Brenda thought the man's education, career, and family background were all impressive. The only thing that worried her was the difference between him and Vanessa. Vanessa had left school after middle school. She was kind and hardworking, but Brenda feared that such a wide gap in education would make it difficult for the two of them to understand each other. When she finally met him, he spoke very little. Aside from a few polite greetings, he hardly joined the conversation. Brenda didn't feel the two of them would be a good match, so she gently told the neighbor that Vanessa wasn't ready to remarry. One after another, several men showed interest in Vanessa, but Brenda turned every one of them down. She couldn't trust any of them enough to place Vanessa's future in their hands. Sometime later, Samuel and Patricia came to see Brenda again. They said they wanted to take Vanessa back home for a while so they could introduce her to another man. The moment Brenda heard their request, she couldn't hide her frustration. It wasn't because she didn't want Vanessa to remarry. It was because Samuel's attitude made it sound as though she had never cared about Vanessa's future. Brenda knew she worried about Vanessa far more than anyone else. Even though Vanessa had already been married once, she wasn't irresponsible or lacking in character. Brenda refused to let her marry just anyone. If Vanessa remarried one day, it had to be to a man who truly deserved her. Otherwise, she would rather have Vanessa stay with her than risk another unhappy marriage. Brenda made up her mind. Until she found someone she could genuinely trust, she wasn't going to let Vanessa leave. Fortunately, Vanessa herself had no intention of going back with her parents. As time passed, Samuel also discovered that the divorced man living near his house wasn't the kind of person he had believed him to be. The man was extremely stingy. Even though he was a grown man, he argued over every penny and every little household expense. It was no surprise that his first marriage had fallen apart. After learning the truth, Samuel finally gave up on the idea of introducing him to Vanessa. Looking back, he realized Brenda had been right from the beginning. Choosing the right husband was far more important than rushing his daughter into another marriage. A few months later, while working at the family restaurant, Vanessa met a man about her age. His name was Henry, and he worked as a welder in the neighboring town. That day, he had come to her town for a job and stopped by the restaurant for lunch. After chatting for a few minutes, Henry asked if he could have her phone number. From then on, they texted each other regularly. As they learned more about each other's lives, they realized they had a lot in common. Henry had never been married. He came from a modest family and lived alone with his elderly mother. Vanessa understood his situation, and Henry understood hers. Before long, they officially started dating. Ever since she began seeing Henry, Vanessa became noticeably happier. Brenda quickly picked up on the change. One afternoon, she even rode her bicycle all the way to the restaurant to ask around. The owner smiled and told her, for the past few months, Vanessa has been seeing a man named Henry. He comes here for lunch quite often. He's from the next town over. From what I've heard, he's a decent man. Brenda wasn't completely convinced, so she decided to ask Vanessa herself. Vanessa, is there someone in your life? Vanessa smiled awkwardly. Not really, Brenda laughed. Come on. If there is, just tell me. You can't hide it from me. I can tell just by looking at you. Vanessa lowered her head, her cheeks turning pink. She gently twisted the hem of her shirt between her fingers and avoided Brenda's eyes. I wasn't trying to hide anything. We're only getting to know each other. We like each other, but nothing's official yet, so I didn't think there was anything to tell you. Brenda nodded before asking, What about his family? What does he do? How old is he? Vanessa laughed softly. Mom, I just told you we're only getting to know each other. Why are you asking so many questions? It feels like an interrogation. Brenda smiled. I'm worried you'll rush into another relationship with the wrong man. You have to be careful. Vanessa squeezed Brenda's hand. I haven't asked him everything yet. I only know he lives with his mother. He's never been married, and he's kind, thoughtful, and easy to talk to. He works as a welder. Brenda nodded slowly. That doesn't sound bad. Even so, take your time. Don't rush anything. I will, Mom. Vanessa held Brenda's hand and smiled. Don't worry. I know what I'm doing. Brenda smiled back, but deep down she had already made up her mind. She was going to find out everything she could about Henry before letting the relationship go any further. After getting Henry's address, Brenda decided to visit his home herself and see whether everything she had heard was true. Standing outside the gate, she looked into the yard. The gate wasn't locked. Inside stood a neat one-story house with a spacious, well-kept garden. His mother must be someone who likes to keep things clean and organized, Brenda thought. You can tell a lot about a family just by looking at their home. That first impression made her feel a little more at ease. She pushed the gate open and walked inside without calling out. On the way there, she had already planned what she wanted to say. If Henry's mother seemed reasonable, Brenda intended to tell her everything about Vanessa and see whether she could accept a daughter-in-law who had been married before. She knew many mothers refused to accept a widow, no matter how kind or hardworking she was. Some believed that because their son had never been married, he deserved someone the same. Why should he marry a widow when he could choose anyone else? As Brenda stepped into the yard, a woman in her late 50s walked out of the house. She was wearing a long-sleeved brown floral outfit, and streaks of gray ran through her hair. The moment the woman looked up and saw Brenda, she froze. The plastic basin in her hands slipped to the ground with a loud clatter. Her lips trembled as she stammered, You! Why are you here? Brenda stopped in her tracks. She stared at the woman, unable to believe what she was seeing. Her chest tightened, and it felt as though someone had wrapped a hand around her heart. Out of everyone in the world, how could it be her? How could fate force them to meet again like this? Years ago, there had been a time when Brenda had hated this woman so much that she wanted to kill her. She was the woman who had shattered the peace of Brenda's family. Brenda stood motionless in the middle of the yard, her eyes locked on the woman before her. Every memory she had buried for decades came rushing back. All the anger and humiliation she had carried for so many years rose to the surface once again. Nearly 40 years earlier, when Brenda was pregnant with James, Robert had been working on a construction project. During that time, he had an affair with a much younger woman. At first, Brenda had no idea who she was. After asking around, she finally learned that the woman came from a neighboring town and worked as a cook for the construction crew. Even though she was heavily pregnant, Brenda went looking for them herself. When Robert realized she knew the truth, he begged her not to hurt the young woman. Please, don't do anything to her, he pleaded. She's pregnant with my child. Brenda felt as if her world had collapsed. She couldn't accept another woman destroying her family. She went straight to confront her. Standing in front of Brenda, the young woman burst into tears and begged, Please don't hurt my baby. I promise I'll leave him. I'll disappear and never come back. Looking at the woman who had shared her husband's bed, Brenda was filled with hatred. Every time she imagined the two of them together, rage took over. She grabbed the woman by the hair and slapped her again and again until blood ran from the corner of her mouth. The young woman fell to the ground. Her shirt slipped aside, revealing her swollen belly. Brenda instinctively looked down at her own stomach. James moved inside her womb. In that instant, she thought about the innocent child she was carrying. Her hand slowly loosened. She stepped back and said through clenched teeth, "Leave this place. Go as far away as you can, and never come back." The young woman nodded over and over. She wiped the blood from her lips, struggled to her feet, and walked away. From that day forward, Brenda never saw her again. Nearly 40 years passed. She never knew how that woman or her child had lived. Even while Robert was still alive, there were times when he would sit quietly, lost in thought. Brenda often felt that he was thinking about the child he had left behind. After she discovered the affair, Robert had knelt before her and begged her not to make the scandal public. He promised he would cut off all contact with the other woman forever. For the sake of their children, their family's reputation, and their future, Brenda buried the secret deep inside her heart. Robert had been gone for years now. She had believed that chapter of her life had ended forever. Yet today, fate had brought the two women face to face once again. After standing there in shock for several moments, Henry's mother hurried across the yard and stopped in front of Brenda. She clutched Brenda's arm as tears filled her eyes. "All these years, I've kept my promise to you. I left and stayed far away. I raised my son by myself. Now that he's grown, I only brought him back so we could live closer to where his father came from. I never tried to interfere with your family. I never even told him who his father is. Everything happened so long ago. My son is innocent. Please, please forgive us." Brenda looked straight into her eyes and asked in a cold voice, "Do you really think you could still interfere with my family after all these years?" The woman quickly shook her head. "No, never. I only want my son and me to keep living the quiet life we have now. That's all I've ever wanted." Hearing those words left Brenda speechless. She didn't know what she was feeling anymore. There was still resentment, but there was also sorrow and pity. She felt sorry for herself, sorry for Vanessa, and, in a strange way, sorry for the woman standing in front of her, who had spent almost her entire life carrying guilt. Brenda had come there to talk about Vanessa and Henry. Instead, she had uncovered the cruelest twist fate could have arranged. She turned around without saying another word and slowly walked away. Her mind was in complete turmoil. Should I stay silent? Should I tell Vanessa the truth? Should I stop this relationship? Every answer led to another impossible question. If she stood in the way, Vanessa would lose the first man she had truly opened her heart to in years. But if she supported the relationship, how could she allow her daughter-in-law to marry James's half-brother? Brenda couldn't find an answer. She kept asking herself the same questions over and over, but no matter how hard she tried, nothing felt right. After several days of wrestling with her thoughts, Brenda decided not to tell Vanessa the truth, at least not yet. She wanted to see how serious the relationship between Vanessa and Henry had become before deciding what to do. One day, she said to her daughter-in-law, "Vanessa, invite Henry over for lunch this Sunday." Vanessa looked at her in surprise. "Mom, why all of a sudden? We've only just started seeing each other. Nothing's official yet." Brenda smiled. "I told you to invite him, so invite him. Think of it as introducing a friend to the family. No one's going to misunderstand." Vanessa's cheeks turned pink. She didn't notice anything unusual in Brenda's expression or the way she spoke. She was completely caught up in the happiness of falling in love again. In her eyes, all she could see was the bright future she dreamed of building with Henry. Following Vanessa's invitation, Henry came over for lunch that Sunday. The moment Brenda saw him, her whole body stiffened. His build, his face, even the way he looked at people. It was as if Robert were standing there again. Brenda had planned to share a meal with the young couple and then have a conversation with both of them afterward. But just as she was about to sit down for lunch, she realized she couldn't bring herself to face Henry. "I'm not feeling well today," she said quietly. "Go ahead and eat without me." She walked into her room, closed the door, and lay on the bed, tears streaming down her face. Vanessa stared after her, completely confused. Henry became uneasy as well. He couldn't stop wondering if he had accidentally said or done something that had upset Brenda. Finally, he turned to Vanessa and asked in a worried voice, "Does your mom not like me?" Vanessa quickly shook her head. "No, she really isn't feeling well. Don't worry." Henry nodded. "People get sick more easily as they get older. Make sure you take good care of her." After a brief pause, he smiled. Maybe one day, if we get married, we can have both our moms live with us. They'd have company, and we'd be able to look after them together. Vanessa smiled warmly. That would be wonderful. I couldn't ask for anything more. I just hope my mom would agree. Older parents always worry about becoming a burden, Henry replied. We'll figure it out together. They quietly finished lunch together. Brenda had invited Henry over so she could talk with him, but in the end, only Vanessa and Henry shared the meal. After lunch, they cleaned up the dishes together. Before leaving, Henry wanted to say goodbye to Brenda, but Vanessa stopped him. Let Mom rest. You can see her another time. Henry nodded and left without disturbing her. Alone in her room, Brenda lay on the bed staring at the ceiling. Her mind was a complete mess. She still couldn't decide what she should do. If she stayed silent and allowed Vanessa and Henry to marry, perhaps that would give Vanessa the happiness she deserved. But did Vanessa have the right to know the truth? Brenda couldn't stop asking herself the same question, yet every answer only led to another impossible choice. About a week later, one evening, Vanessa said to Brenda, Mom, Henry wants to take me to meet his mother tomorrow. Is it okay if I go? Brenda answered with only a few words. What time? Tomorrow morning. All right. She didn't ask anything else. Early the next morning, Vanessa dressed more carefully than Brenda had seen in years. She even took extra time doing her makeup. Watching her daughter-in-law get ready so happily, Brenda couldn't help thinking that Vanessa must truly love Henry. She quietly turned her face away so Vanessa wouldn't notice the tears gathering in her eyes. Her aging hands trembled slightly, and she could feel her heart pounding inside her chest. Vanessa walked over, took Brenda's hand, and looked into her eyes. Mom, what's wrong? Are you sad? I'm only going over there for lunch. You always tell me to get married, and now you're the one feeling down. Brenda forced a smile. Go on, Vanessa pouted playfully. It was the same expression she always made whenever Brenda teased or scolded her. After getting ready, she drove to Henry's house. She had insisted on going by herself instead of letting Henry pick her up. Henry was already waiting outside the gate. His mother had prepared everything carefully to welcome the woman she believed might become her daughter-in-law. As soon as Vanessa arrived, Henry opened the gate for her. She parked her car in the driveway, walked inside, and looked around. Everything about the house felt warm and welcoming. She caught herself thinking that if she ever married Henry, this would become her home. Just then, Henry called out, Mom, Vanessa's here. His mother came upstairs from the kitchen with a bright smile. You've arrived. Hello, ma'am. Come in and have a seat. I'm just finishing the soup. Let me help you. Vanessa set her purse on the table and followed her into the kitchen. A full meal had already been prepared. It was obvious that Henry and his mother had spent a great deal of time getting everything ready. Vanessa felt deeply touched. Upstairs, Henry was setting the dining table. He was more nervous than he wanted to admit. He had never told his mother that Vanessa had been married before. He didn't know whether she would accept it once she found out. His mother was just as excited. When Henry had first told her he wanted to bring his girlfriend home, she had asked endless questions. What's she like? What kind of family does she come from? Does she have a stable job? Henry had only smiled and answered, She's a wonderful woman. I'm sure you'll like her. Hearing that had made his mother very happy. It was the first time her son had ever brought a woman home. She believed he must be serious about spending his life with Vanessa. Vanessa looked especially beautiful that morning. When Henry saw her standing at the gate, he couldn't take his eyes off her. She's so beautiful, he thought. How could I not love her? While Henry was adjusting one of the table legs, Vanessa carried another dish upstairs and said, Could you run to the market and buy some fruit for me? We can go together later. Vanessa smiled and gently pushed him toward the door. No, I want to stay here and talk with your mom for a while. I can handle this on my own. Go ahead. Henry laughed and headed out. Vanessa walked back into the kitchen where Henry's mother was finishing the soup. She picked up a few green onions and began trimming them. Then she spoke softly. Ma'am, are you Brenda's friend? Henry's mother froze. She slowly turned around to look at Vanessa. What? What did you just say? Vanessa smiled politely. My name is Vanessa. I used to be James's wife. Brenda is my mother-in-law. The kitchen fell completely silent. Henry's mother stood there in shock, staring at Vanessa. After a long pause, she finally managed to ask, "You're Brenda's daughter-in-law?" "Yes," Vanessa nodded. "James passed away several years ago. Since then, I've stayed with Mom. She's the one who encouraged Henry and me to get to know each other." Hearing those words, Henry's mother's face turned pale. She leaned against the counter to steady herself. Vanessa noticed something was wrong and quickly stepped closer. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Henry's mother looked at her with tears welling in her eyes. She wanted to tell Vanessa the truth, but the words wouldn't come out. After struggling with herself for a long moment, she forced a smile. "I'm fine." Vanessa gently held her arm. "You don't look fine." Henry's mother slowly pulled her hand away and lowered her head. "Vanessa, I don't think you and Henry should keep seeing each other." Vanessa was stunned. "Why? Please, don't ask me why. Did I do something wrong?" Henry's mother shook her head. "No, you're a wonderful woman. Any family would be lucky to have you. The problem isn't you." Vanessa stood there in silence, completely confused. She couldn't understand why Henry's mother had suddenly changed her attitude. Just a few minutes earlier, she had welcomed her so warmly. Now she was telling her to end the relationship without giving any reason. She looked at the older woman for a long time before speaking again. "Is it because I was married before?" Henry's mother quickly shook her head. "No." "Then what is it?" Tears finally rolled down the older woman's cheeks. "I'm sorry, but I can't tell you." Vanessa didn't ask another question. She quietly nodded. "I understand." She untied her apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the kitchen counter. "Please tell Henry I'm sorry. I'll leave now, without waiting for anyone to stop her." Vanessa turned and walked out of the house. She didn't know why everything had changed so suddenly, but she could tell that whatever the reason was, it was something Henry's mother could never bring herself to say. Vanessa rode home in silence. The moment she walked through the front door, Brenda could tell something had happened. She looked at Vanessa's face and asked softly, "You're back already?" Vanessa forced a faint smile. "Yeah." Brenda studied her for a moment before asking, "Did something happen?" Vanessa sat down beside her without saying a word. After a long silence, she finally rested her head on Brenda's shoulder. "Mom, Henry's mother told me not to see him anymore." Brenda's heart tightened. Even though she had expected this, hearing it from Vanessa still hurt. She gently stroked Vanessa's hair. "Did she tell you why?" Vanessa shook her head. "No, she just kept saying we shouldn't be together. I asked if it was because I'd been married before, but she said no. She wouldn't tell me anything else." Brenda closed her eyes for a moment. She knew exactly why Henry's mother had done it. She also knew that if the truth ever came out, it would hurt Vanessa even more. Vanessa sat quietly beside her before speaking again. "Mom, maybe we're just not meant to be." Brenda wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Some things aren't meant to last, no matter how much we want them to." Vanessa nodded. "I won't see him again." That night, Henry called over and over. Vanessa looked at the phone each time it rang, but she never answered. A few minutes later, another call came in, then another. Finally, a text message appeared. "Vanessa? What happened? Did my mom say something to upset you? Please talk to me." Vanessa read the message several times before locking her phone without replying. She knew Henry wasn't the one who had pushed her away. He had done nothing wrong. But if his own mother had asked her to leave, she couldn't pretend nothing had happened. Over the next few days, Henry kept trying to reach her. He even waited outside the restaurant where she worked, hoping to see her. Vanessa quietly asked her manager to tell him she was busy and couldn't come out. After waiting for a long time, Henry finally left. Not long after that, the calls stopped. The messages stopped too. Henry understood that Vanessa had made her choice. Even though he never learned the real reason, he chose to respect her decision and let her go. A year later, Vanessa's father, Samuel, suddenly suffered a stroke. The local hospital transferred him to the Kansas City Medical Center for emergency treatment as quickly as possible. Since Vanessa's brothers and sisters all worked full-time and had young children to take care of, none of them could stay at the hospital with him. Vanessa ended up handling everything on her own. Fortunately, one of Brenda's nephews worked at the hospital. His name was Ethan. Whenever they needed help with doctors, nurses, or paperwork, Brenda always asked Ethan. During the entire month Samuel stayed in the hospital, Ethan stopped by several times every week. Sometimes he came to check on Samuel's condition. Other times he brought food for Vanessa. There were even nights when he stayed with Samuel so Vanessa could go back to the motel and get some rest. One day, Vanessa stepped out to buy porridge for her father. While she was gone, Samuel needed to use the restroom. Ethan happened to be there at that moment. Without the slightest hesitation, he helped Samuel out of bed and carefully supported him all the way to the bathroom. When Vanessa returned and saw Ethan helping her father as though he were caring for his own family, she was deeply moved. She had never imagined that a well-educated man with a respected position like Ethan would treat a stranger with such kindness and patience. Little by little, Vanessa realized Ethan paid special attention to both her and her father. She began to understand how he felt about her, but that only made her more self-conscious. Compared to him, she felt she had nothing to offer. Ethan noticed her hesitation, yet instead of backing away, he cared for Samuel even more devotedly. Whenever he had free time, he came to the hospital to help Vanessa shoulder the burden. After 2 months of treatment, Samuel's condition improved a great deal, and he was finally discharged from the hospital. Vanessa couldn't have been happier. After completing all the discharge paperwork, she went to find Ethan to thank him and say goodbye. Ethan smiled as he looked at her. His eyes were filled with warmth and affection. Vanessa had grown fond of him too, but she kept those feelings to herself because she believed she wasn't good enough for a man like him. The next morning, as she helped her father into a taxi to go home, she kept looking around, hoping to catch one last glimpse of Ethan. In the end, he never appeared. After taking Samuel home, Vanessa returned to Brenda's house and went back to her normal routine. She planned to use the money from selling the townhouse that she and James had once owned to open a small convenience store. Brenda supported the idea right away. "Keep that money for yourself," she told Vanessa. "You'll need it for the future. I'll pay for the store." Vanessa looked at Brenda and broke into a wide smile. Ever since Vanessa came home from the hospital, Ethan called or texted her every day. Whenever he had the weekend off, he drove back to Liberty, using visits to Brenda, his aunt, as an excuse to see Vanessa. Brenda had already figured out how Ethan felt about her daughter-in-law. One day, she called him over and asked him directly, "Ethan, tell me the truth. Do you have feelings for Vanessa?" Ethan didn't try to hide it anymore. He nodded and admitted, "Yes, Aunt Brenda. I love Vanessa, and I want to marry her." The very next day, Brenda went to Ethan's parents' house to speak with them about the two of them getting married. Since Ethan's parents were Brenda's relatives, they had known Vanessa for years. They had always thought she was a kind, gentle, and well-mannered woman. What impressed them the most was how devoted she had been to Brenda. They agreed without hesitation. The only concern they had was that Ethan was still working in Kansas City. Ethan told them he had already submitted a request to transfer back to the state. Once the transfer was approved, he would return home permanently. Both families agreed that after Ethan completed the transfer, they would hold the wedding right away. After returning from Ethan's parents' house, Brenda went straight home and told Vanessa everything. The moment Vanessa heard the news, her face turned bright red. She looked at Brenda and said in an embarrassed voice, "Mom, who does something like that? Usually the man's family comes to the woman's family first, but you went looking for them instead. It's like the fence went looking for the post." "You're going to embarrass me to death," Brenda laughed. "What's there to be embarrassed about? If you're that embarrassed, then fine. We'll just call off the wedding." "Mom!" Vanessa protested, pouting. Brenda looked at the expression on her face and burst into laughter. "Just look at you. You're happy, but you're still pretending you're not." Vanessa covered her face, unable to hide her smile any longer. Seeing her daughter-in-law laughing like that filled Brenda's heart with relief. After everything Vanessa had gone through over the years, she had finally found another chance at happiness. That was all Brenda had ever wanted. 3 months later, Vanessa and Ethan's wedding was held. Brenda proudly announced that she was marrying off her daughter-in-law. Relatives from both sides of the family gathered to celebrate. At Brenda's invitation, Henry and his mother were also welcome to attend and pay their respects to the family ancestors. They arrived early that morning to help Brenda prepare for the ceremony. During the part of the wedding where the bride was formally presented to the groom's family, Brenda held her head high as she walked onto the stage and presented Vanessa with her wedding gift. The moment she finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. Guests cheered and praised her. Everyone spoke about what an extraordinary mother-in-law she was. Dressed in a white wedding gown, Vanessa threw her arms around her mother before turning to Brenda. Holding both of Brenda's hands, she said with a radiant smile, "Mom, you're the best mother-in-law anyone could ever ask for." The guests burst into applause once again. 6 months later, Vanessa received the joyful news that she was pregnant. She could hardly believe it herself. She had never imagined that happiness would come to her so completely. Quietly, she thanked God for blessing her with the life she had always dreamed of. It had taken longer than she ever expected, but her happiness was finally whole. And among the people who had guided her to that new beginning, the one she would always be most grateful for was Brenda, the greatest mother-in-law she could ever have. In the end, both women found happiness again. One found love again, and the other gained another child to love. A mother-in-law who kept encouraging her daughter-in-law to remarry may sound like something that only exists in stories, yet people like her are still out there. Brenda loved Vanessa as if she were her own daughter. Her kindness and generosity touched everyone around her. Then again, kindness is often returned with kindness. Because Brenda loved her daughter-in-law with all her heart, Vanessa loved her just as deeply, treating her as her own mother. This mother-in-law and daughter-in-law proved that family isn't defined by blood alone. Sometimes the strongest bonds are built through love, loyalty, and the choices we make for one another. We'd love to hear what you think about the people in this story. Please share your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. And if this story moved you and you'd like to support the channel, you can send a super thanks. Your support helps us continue creating and sharing more heartfelt stories like this one. Thank you so much for listening. Take care, and we'll see you in the next story.